Hi, in this tutorial we're going to create a crank arm for a bicycle in Autodesk Fusion 360. So let's get started. The first thing we want to do is come over here to our view cube and click on front. We're now looking at the front of our part. Now let's come over to where it says origin here, and we're going to click on this arrow to reveal our three planes. Now we want to select the XY plane because that lines up with our front view here. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to click on Create Sketch. And at this point, let's come down to this drop-down menu, Create Rectangle, and click on Center Rectangle. And from here, I'm going to click on the origin, and I'm going to drag out, and I'm going to place this rectangle here. Now I'm going to right-click and hit OK. But before we go any further, I want to change my document settings to be millimeters. So I'm going to come over here to document settings and click on this arrow. And where it says units, inches, click on change active units. It's this little button here. And we're going to change this to millimeter. And just hit OK. And from here, we can come over here to where it says sketch dimension on this menu. And we're going to set this dimension to be 37 millimeters and hit enter. And we're going to set a dimension on the other leg to be 19 millimeters. And that's our first profile. So after that's been created, you can hit finish sketch. And with this being made, let's come over here and click on the corner here. With this being made, we want to create another plane that we can use. So let's click on XY again. This was the plane that we used to make this sketch. I'm going to come over here to construct, click on the drop down, and click on offset plane. And there's this little arrow. Now you can drag this back and forth, or you can just type in a value. So I want my distance to be, let's say, 200, so 200 millimeters. And now if we want to flip the direction, see, I want to flip the direction here, so I'm just going to put a negative in front of the 200. You can do that either here in this little window or you can do it in this box, but we're going to hit OK. And we now have a plane which is offset from our original plane. And you can create a sketch on a plane. So what we want to do is we want to click on this plane, and we're going to come over here and click on Create Sketch. And like we did before, let's come up to the Create command, and we're going to come down to Rectangle and Center Rectangle. And we're going to place this on this green line here. This is lined up with the origin and with the center point of our original rectangle. So I'm just going to place this at around here, and I'm going to set this dimension to be 28 millimeters. And if you hit tab on your keyboard, it'll automatically go to the next leg. Make that 16 millimeters. And that's what we want. So what we want to do is we want to set a dimension that is 15 millimeters from this bottom leg to this leg here. So make this 15 millimeters. And that's what we want. And we want to lock the location of this rectangle in place. So you can click on the center of this rectangle and click on the center of this rectangle. And if you click on this constraint right here, that's going to permanently lock them in place so they cannot move. And so from here, we can finish our sketch. And if I rotate around, I can come down and click on Orbit here, and I can rotate this around a little bit, and we could get a better look at what we've created. So this is what we want. And from here, what we want to do is we want to create another sketch. So we're going to start this sketch actually on the YZ plane. And the YZ plane cuts through these rectangles in the other direction. So let's create a sketch. And we're going to create a spline. So come over here and click on Fit Point Spline. and we're going to click on the top of the first rectangle, and we're just going to try to feel out the profile that we want. We can always change it later if necessary. And we're going to place that here and right click OK. And from here we're going to click on line, and we're going to create a line. Oh, you see, actually this isn't correct. This needs to be dragged up to the top. So if you hover over the top of your rectangle and you click on the point on your spline, you can click on coincident here up in the constraints, and that will constrain them accordingly. Yeah, be sure that's right. See, I'm zooming in and I'm seeing that it didn't do what I wanted to. So just be sure of that. Click on this point, hold down shift, click on this point, and click on coincident to make them coincident. And so with that created, I'm just going to save this, and I'm going to click on line, and I'm going to start a line on this point, and I'm going to drag out, and I'm going to create another line on the other point, and I'm going to drag out. And from here, I'm going to click on the spline that we created, and I'm going to hold down shift and click on this line as well. And I'm going to click on this constraint. It's called tangent. And when you click on it, it's going to make these lines tangent to each other. So let's do that with this set as well. And there we go. We now have a spline that's tangent to both these lines. Okay, great. So let's finish our sketch. And now we have our sketch created, which is great. So from here, we want to create a loft. So we're going to come to create, and under create, which will automatically be up. This is the solid tab right here that we're in. So come down to create, and let's come down to our loft. So this window is going to pop up on the right side. What you want to do is you want to click on the first rectangle that we made, and then you want to click on the second one, and that's going to draw a profile between them, a sort of solid between them, I should say. And we're going to click on this little cursor right here where it says rails, so click on that. And when you have that selected, click on this profile that we created, the spline that we created. You click on it, and you're going to see that our original profile is now kind of bent to this spline along the path of the spline. So that's what we want. We're going to hit OK, and we're just going to take a second to inspect what we've created. So that's our shape so far. With our shape created, we want to add a couple fillets to round out these ends. So let's come up to fillet, and we're going to select this edge and this edge, and we're going to type in 18.1, so 18.1 millimeters, and we're going to hit enter. And we're going to do the same thing on the other side here. So come up to fillet, and we're going to click on this edge, and we want to make that 14.3, and we're going to hit OK. And now we've rounded out the ends of our part. And so we now have part of our shape complete. From here, let's come over to our view cube, and we're going to select this edge and then the top to look at the top of our part. And from here, we're going to come over to our planes on the left side. And if we hover over XZ, you're going to see the XZ plane come up. So we're going to start a sketch on this plane. So come over and click on Create Sketch. And once we've created our sketch, we need to come down to Create, the Create drop down right here. And we're going to come down to where it says Project/Include. And click on Project. And once you have that selected, what we want to do is select this point right here. It's between the arc and the other arc, so click on that. And we also want to click on this point. And let's select the other two as well. And with those 4 points selected, we're just going to hit OK. And now we have those points selected. So what we can do from here is we can come to Create. And we're going to come down to Arc. And we're going to select the 3-point arc. And we're going to click on this point and then this point. And you're going to see that we can create an arc pretty much at any angle that we choose. So I'm going to bring it in to about here, and I'm going to click down, and I want to do the same thing on the other side. And I want to set a dimension, so I'm going to click Sketch Dimension, and I'm going to click on the arc, and a large number is going to come up because this is a large radius of a large circle. So we're just going to hit Enter. And if we click on the other side, we're going to click, once you see that it comes up in blue, just click on the first one, and that's going to link the 2 dimensions, and just hit Enter. And so now these 2 arcs are equal to each other because they're the same dimension. And what we want to do is let's come to Line, and let's create a sketch. Now this doesn't need to be dimensioned. I'm just creating a box that closes the profile. So you can come and just create a box to close up this profile. And with our sketch created, let's come up to Finish Sketch. And now with our sketch finished, let's come over to Extrude. And we're going to select this profile and this profile. And if I rotate my part a little bit, it's going to make it a little easier to see what we're doing here. So under Operation, let's change this to Cut because we're creating a cut. And if I take this arrow and drag it upward, you're going to see it's going to cut through our part. But we don't want to just cut in one direction. We want to cut in 2 directions. So let's come to Direction and let's select Symmetric. Now we're cutting symmetrically the same distance through 2 different directions. So we're going to hit OK. And if I look at this from the top now, you're going to see that the cut we've made has changed the top profile. And that's what we want. So from here, we want to create an extrusion. So we want to create an extrusion here on the bottom. And the way to do that is we're going to come to our plane. Here, our XZ plane. And if I start a sketch here on the XZ plane, then I can come and create a center diameter circle, and I can place it where I'd like it to be. Now, it's going to be helpful for me to select this arc, and with the arc selected, I can come over to Create, and I can come down to Project, and I can project that arc. And with that arc projected, it's going to be a little bit easier for me to find where my center of my circle is. So let me just place my circle kind of randomly for now. And I'm going to try to drag it into place. Now, to help me a little bit more, I can come up to Line and create a line from this point that comes out, and another line that comes to this point here. And now with these 2 lines, I can determine the center of my circle. So I'm going to click on these 2 lines, select them both, and click on Construction here on the right to make them construction lines. And I can select this point and put them on top of each other with a coincident constraint. And now I can make my circle whatever size I'd like it to be. So I'm going to make it about this size. So we're just going to set a dimension here, pretty loose. We're going to set it to be about 34.9 millimeters. And with that created, we're going to finish our sketch. And if we look at this from our view here, we can hit extrude, and if we drag down and change the operation to join, we can create an extrusion that's going to join to the original extrusion. And we want this to come down about, let's say, 20 millimeters. Now we can always change it, but for now we're just going to leave it at that dimension. And we're going to hit OK. And after that's been created, what we want to do from here is create a few holes here in our part. So let's create a new sketch. We're going to start on the XZ plane. And I'm going to create a center circle here. And I'm going to create it with the same method that we used before. So let me drag out a line. Once I click on these 2 points, the origin and this point right here, I can project them, and then I can create 2 lines that come out from it. And once I select both of them, I can make them construction. And I can come to center circle, and drag out a center circle that is 25 millimeters. And that 25 millimeter circle is here at the bottom, but here at the other end, we want to create another circle, so we're just going to place it, and we want this to be 20 millimeters. So I'm going to type in 20 millimeters and hit enter. And just like before, we have our same situation. We want to drag out a line here to make this a little bit easier. So I'm going to project this point here and this point. And that's going to help me in creating my line, my 2 lines. So one line is going to come out to be in line with this point. And once you created those, same thing, click on both of them with Shift and make them construction, and place the center of your circle right on that point. And you now have your 2 circles, and these are what we're going to use to create our extruded cut. So let's finish our sketch, and we're going to come over here to extrude, and we're going to click on this circle and this circle right here. And with both of these profiles selected, we can now cut down through our part. Now I want to make this the direction symmetric, and that's going to make sure that we cut through the entire part. Make sure your operation is set to cut and just hit OK. And that's what we're left with. And so from here, what we want to do is we want to create the fitting that's going to go inside here. So what we'd like to do is start a sketch here, and be sure to save every once in a while. We're going to start a sketch here on the YZ plane that's intersecting the part. So start a sketch there. And what we're going to do from here is let's come up to Tools. And to make this a little bit easier to see, let's click on Section Analysis and click on this plane right here. And that's going to cut our part right in half. So hit OK. And we're still in our sketch here, so we can start creating our profile for our revolve of the fitting. All right, so from here, let's create a line. Now the line is gonna come from this bottom point, and it's gonna come all the way up, let's say to about here, about 22.68 millimeters, and hit enter, and that's your first line. So again, I just placed it right here on this corner point, and I dragged it up, and it's 22.68. And from here, let's create another line. This one's going to be 2 millimeters, so just hit 2 and enter, and let's create yet another one. click on this point, drag down, and let's set a dimension here between this point and this one. We want this to be 8.2. And we want to set an angle. So we're going to click on sketch dimension. We're going to click on this first line and the second one. And we're going to make this dimension 3.5. And with that set, we want to create yet another line, 1.85 millimeters across. And you can see that that's actually not straight across. That's not what we want. You can also see this thing is moving. I need to place it back on this point. If it doesn't place automatically, you may need to select it. So let's come to create, and we're going to do the same thing we did before, project. And I want to project this line, and I want to select this whole face. And now my point has appeared, so I can kind of snap to it here. Okay, great. So let's click on this line because it's being a little bit stubborn. Let's click on it, and let's click on horizontal/vertical. And you're going to see that that doesn't work because there's some sort of constraint here that's disallowing it. See, this constraint was created automatically. This is a perpendicular constraint, so you can just delete that. And let's try that one more time. Okay, great. Now it works. Okay, so from here, let's create a 3-point arc. Come to create, and let's go to arc, 3-point arc. Click on this point here. And what we want to do is drag this out and just kind of place it here for now. And let's set a dimension between this end point here and this point. And we want to make this 1.88 millimeters. And that's just a distance. And so from here, we also want to kind of set another constraint here. Let's create a line and place it on this point and drag out. And let's select the line and this arc, and let's make them tangent. And so now they're tangent. And with that created, let's set a dimension on this arc. Now I want this arc to be 18.58. And let's click on this original line we created and make a construction. Okay, great. So from here, what we want to do is we want to close up our profile. So let's come to line, and let's click on our point where the arc ends. And if we can find it, it may be a little bit hard to see. There's the point. So let's create a line, click on the point, and let's come down and come across to kind of finish this off. And we have our profile created. Now from here we can finish our sketch. And let's come to solid and revolve. So our profile is automatically selected. Now we're going to click on the axis here, which is this line. And that's going to revolve our fitting. So we want to create a new body, and that's automatically selected. We don't want to join, we want to create a new body. So let's hit OK. And if we look at this from another angle here, if I come back to tools and turn off my section analysis, if I come to my analysis here on the left hand side and right click on this and just click delete, now that's going to get rid of our section analysis. We can kind of see the shape that we have here. So that's what we want. And from here, we want to create another cut. So let me exit out of this, and I'm going to create a sketch here. So I'm going to click on this face, and let me come to solid, and I'm going to create a sketch. Sorry about that. I'm just going to create a sketch. right on this face. And now that I'm creating a sketch on this face, I had to select the face. That was the issue. So with this face selected, after you create a sketch on this face, what you want to do next is you want to create a center rectangle. So come to rectangle, center rectangle, and let's create a rectangle here. We want it to be 13.33, and that's in both directions, 0.33. And when you hit enter, it'll be created for you. You can kind of rotate this around a little bit. We want to place this right in the center here. So I'm going to show you a little trick. You can click on the circle and just click P on the keyboard. And if you select a circle and hit OK, the center of the circle will automatically come up. And that's what you want, because you want to be able to place the center of the rectangle on the center of the circle. Now with that created, let's come up to Fillet. And we're going to click on these lines to create our fillets. So just click on this leg and this leg, and let's type in 2, and that's going to make it 2 millimeters. So if you're at 13.33 on both legs and your radius is 2.0, then and with this sketch finished, what we're going to do is finish our sketch and then come to solid, and we're going to click on extrude, and let's select the profile that we created. And what we want to do is extrude through our part, and we want to set our distance to be long enough that we're cutting through our whole part. As long as it's long enough, it should be fine. And we want our taper angle to be -2 degrees, and you're going to see that it tapers inward. And as long as we have cut selected, we can hit OK. And if we look at this now from the top here, we can see that we've cut through our arm. So that's what we want. Now the next thing we need to do is we need to do the same thing for the other side. So I'm going to start a new sketch, and that new sketch is going to happen on the YZ plane. And let's come to Tools, and let's click on Section Analysis. And we want to select the plane that we're currently working on, the YZ plane. And let's hit OK. After projecting this face right here, what I want to do next is I want to come to my 2-point rectangle right here, and I want to drag it out and place it along this line. And I'm going to set a dimension here between the line and this point, and I'd like this to be 2 millimeters. Now I also want to create a dimension between this point and this line, and this one is going to measure up to be 2.4. And after having created those two dimensions, I can now create a final dimension for the diameter here. So the way that I'm going to do that is I'm going to create a line between this line and this line. And I'm also going to place another line perpendicular to it. And if I select this point and this line, I can come up here and click on this midpoint constraint. And that's going to set it to be the midpoint. Now, with that being done, I can set a dimension. Well, first what I'd like to do is I'd like to fix this point. I'm just going to fix this point, and I want to move this here and fix this point just so it doesn't move. And now I can set a dimension between this line and the inside here. And I want this to be 12.86. And that's going to be divided by 2 because this is the radius. And that's about what we want it to look like. So what we want to do is add a couple little fillets here. I'm just going to select this edge and this edge, and I'm going to make this 0.5 millimeter, and hit OK. And I'm just going to hit finish. And then from here, as we did before, we want to do a revolve. So we're going to select this profile here. And for the axis, we're going to select this line. And that's going to revolve it accordingly. And so I think we selected the wrong thing here. That's the risk of not paying attention. So operation, I want this to be a new body. And there we go. That's how we're fitting. So that's going to be a new body. And that's gonna work out just the way we want it to. So we're going to exit the section analysis. So to do that, we're just gonna right click on our section analysis here and just hit show/hide. Or what we want to do from here is create a small modification to one of our sketches. So let's right click on this sketch that we created for our revolve. So let's edit the sketch. And we're going to delete this leg right here. So delete that. And we're going to create a line that comes from the bottommost point here of this leg. And it's going to just come straight up. And then across. And we're going to connect back to our original sketch. And when you finish the sketch, everything should update accordingly as long as all the sketches are all connected. At this point, we can add the threads to our crank arm. So let's orbit this a little bit so we can see it a little bit better. And we're going to come up to Create. And under Create, we're going to come to Thread. And for this example, we're going to click on this face. And we're going to set this to be 0.5625. So we need to change from ISO metric to ANSI unified screw threads. I'm going to choose 0.5625 and I'm going to make this a 9/16 20. So 20 threads per inch. And this is going to be a left hand for the direction. And we're going to click on this little box that says modeled. And we're going to do a similar thing to the other side. So I'm going to come down to thread. And I'm going to click on this face. And for this example, I'm going to make it an M21. And I'm also going to make sure to model in the threads. And I'm going to hit OK. And from here, what we'd like to do is add a couple fillets to our part. So one place where we need fillets is here on the underside. So let's come to fillet and let's click on this edge right here. And we're going to drag out. And if we drag out too much, we get an error message because our fillet is too large and it cannot be modeled at that size. But at this size at about 6 millimeters, that's going to work for us. So we're going to set it to be 6 millimeters for now. And we also need some extra fillets for these other edges. So let's come back to fillet. And let's select this edge and the other edges. And we're going to draw in. And we see that we're getting an error message. And that's likely because this edge right here is a sharp edge. So what we may need to do is create fillets on that first. So let's try that and see if that changes anything. I'm going to select these two edges and I'm going to rotate around and select the other two as well. And with these four selected, I can now draw in a little bit my arrow. So I can push this in a few millimeters. Now we get an error message if we go overboard and make it too large. You can also destroy your part, as you can see, but we just want to go with small increments. So I'm going to type in 1 millimeter. And that seems to be working, so I'm going to hit OK. And once that is created, we can come back to our fillet and create a couple more fillets. So I want to create a fillet here at the top, and I'm gonna just type in a value 2 millimeters and just see what that looks like. And we can go more, we can try 4, and that's gonna be about good. So we're gonna leave it at that for the top, and we want to do the bottom as well. So let's come back to fillet and let's click on this bottom fillet. And we're going to see how much we can go without getting an error message as we did the last time. So I'm going to make this 4 millimeters, and that looks just about good. And those are the fillets on our crank arm. Now, if you'd like, you can also change the color of the parts. So just as an example, we created this fitting in here. What I can do is I can come down to where it says bodies, and I can choose this body, body number 3, and I can change the color. So I can right click and go to appearance, and the appearance tab is going to come up here on the right side, and I can make this an enamel that's glossy, and I can also change the color of the crank arm itself, or I can make that black and then have this be red. So that's a really easy way to distinguish a body from another body, and it also gives it a really cool look. So that's our crank arm.